Any volunteers to read today? No volunteers? Are you able to hear me? Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu. I can hear you.
Rudradi Prabhu, can you read yourself?
Yeah, sure. Preaching to America, Part 2. Los Angeles, July 22nd, 1975. More than 3 weeks had passed since Prabhupada had given the order for the BBT to produce 17 books in 2 months. Now Rameshwara and Radhaballava reported that work was going on around the clock in all departments, and the devotees were determined to meet their deadlines. Most press workers attended Mangalarti at 4:30 a.m., chanted their prescribed rounds of japa, and worked all day until late at night, sometimes taking one meal. Additional editors, painters, photographers, indexers, typists, proofreaders, and layout men had been called in from other ISKCON departments. Everyone was cooperating to fulfill Srila Prabhupada's desire. It was as though nothing else existed except the task before them. Kingsport Press, one of the largest printers in the country, had taken the job of printing, agreeing to push back all the other assignments to free their presses and bindery for work 24 hours a day until all 17 volumes were printed. A paper company in New York had agreed to supply paper at affordable terms to meet all the deadlines. The BBT's top photographer was in India photographing places of Chaitanya Leela, especially in Bengal and Orissa. Srila Prabhupada freely gave his time to the artists and the Bengali editors, answering their questions. Several times a day, his disciples would come to him about the exact use of Sanskrit and Bengali words. This was not merely a matter of lingual scholarship, since each word had to be translated in light of the previous Acharya's explanations and Prabhupada's own Krishna conscious realization. Prabhupada had cautioned disciple editors, not to change, but to ask. The artists had their usual questions about how things should look according to Srila Prabhupada's transcendental vision. In their desire to have the painting completely accurate, they were greedy to ask him almost endless questions. Prabhupada had said the transcendental paintings of his disciples were windows to the spiritual world. The artists didn't want their imaginations to obscure the view. One day, Rameshwara came into Srila Prabhupada's room, carrying canvases by one of the artists whose proficiency the more experienced artist questioned. The artist in question, Gauri Devidasi, was a book distributor with artistic talent, pressed into emergency service for the book production marathon. Rameshwara showed Srila Prabhupada her painting of the Gundicha temple. Prabhupada's verdict, "Oh, this is very nice." One of the senior artists was present and pointed out several technical errors, but Prabhupada replied, "A blind uncle is better than none." Besides, he said the painting showed a devotional spirit the readers of the book would appreciate. Due to Srila Prabhupada's presence in Los Angeles, the book production marathon intensified. Even without attending Prabhupada's morning walks or classes or evening readings in the garden, the press workers felt ecstasy. All day they worked at what Prabhupada wanted most, and to take time off to go see him, they reasoned would be selfish. Giving all their energy for Krishna, they felt blissful. The press was busy day and night. To see devotees slumped over their desks or typewriters or laying beside their easels at 2 or 3 in the morning was not unusual. proofreaders saw manuscripts come into and out of their hands so quickly they could hardly bear it. An artist might fall asleep before an uncompleted painting and awaken to find it being finished by another artist's easel. Rameshwara, running on very little sleep, orchestrated everything, including the photographer in India, the printer, and the paper company. Sometimes he would work directly with Radhavallabha on various aspects of the production. Radhavallabha had set the deadlines, and he kept to them at all costs. To the press workers, he seemed to be present everywhere, encouraging them, bringing them supplies, seeing to their needs, begging and coercing them to complete their quotas. But one night he took a break and entered Prabhupada's room during an informal gathering of devotees. Prabhupada, his eyes closed, his head gently rocking, was listening to a tape of himself singing bhajans. Opening his eyes and seeing Radhavallabha seated amongst the others, he said, "I'm keeping you," and again closed his eyes. One of the devotees spoke up and said, "Oh, no, Prabhupada, you're not bothering us." But another devotee turned to Radhavallabha and said, "I think Prabhupada was talking to you." Radhavallabha realized what Prabhupada meant. He was telling him to go back to work. It was as if Prabhupada were actually saying, "Why are you sitting here and looking at me? Get back to work." Srila Prabhupada was pleased with the sincerity of his disciples. 17 books in 2 months he had asked them to produce, and they, rather than try to explain to him why this was impossible, had taken the order so seriously that they could not conceive of rejecting or changing or modifying it. Instead of modifying the order, they had modified their lives. They had gone beyond the realm of routine work into the realm of extraordinary effort. As a result, both they and Prabhupada felt great satisfaction. And as Prabhupada said, it was all an arrangement for the satisfaction of Lord Caitanya and the previous acharyas. Srila Prabhupada decided to continue his US tour, visiting Laguna Beach and San Diego, and then going on to Dallas. From there, he would visit New Orleans and the nearby ISKCON farm in Mississippi, then on to Detroit, Toronto, Boston, and New York, eventually traveling to Europe and India. From Prabhupada's point of view, his touring was imperative for spreading Krishna consciousness, as he said.
Hare Krishna, Rudradi Prabhu, it is Laguna Beach, not Laguna. Just it's Laguna Beach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Laguna Beach.
Okay. It's a famous temple of the Panchatattva. Okay, go ahead.
From Prabhupada's point of view, his touring was imperative for spreading Krishna consciousness. As he had said in his arrival address at Berkeley, "I'm traveling all over the world thrice in a year. My duty is to see that my disciples who have accepted me as guru may not fall down. This is my anxiety." Prabhupada's concern was for his disciples, but also for all people distressed by the fallen and ignorant state of humanity, especially in the West. He wanted to help the English-speaking world, as his spiritual master had ordered. This had been his spirit 2 years ago in Kolkata, when he had risen from his sick bed and flown to London to take part in the Rath Yatra. This was his great desire, to preach in the West, where people were so strongly under the grip of speculative philosophies, denying God and glorifying sense enjoyment. The mass of people would not easily change their ignorant ways, but if he could make only one person a pure devotee, he said, then his work would be successful. Prabhupada would work intensively with his important India projects for a few months, but then would always return to the West to again tour and preach. Both were required, developing his projects in India and touring in the West. When Yogi Bhajan and company in Berkeley had expressed their amazement at how Prabhupada was personally maintaining his disciples by traveling all over the world. Prabhupada had admitted that it was difficult and that he was trying to train his GBC secretaries to lead his movement. But so far, it seemed that as long as he had the power to do so, he would continue to travel.
Just a point of mention, I mean, in the Lilamrita, and so there is a favorable mention of Yogi Bhajan as being favorable towards Prabhupada. But later on, we know, or at least from the recent times, relatively recent times, that Yogi Bhajan was very scandalous, controversial, and yeah, right now he's not regarded as a spiritual figure at all. I mean, of course, he left his body, but he was very scandalous. Okay, please go ahead.
Laguna Beach, July 25, 1975. Laguna Beach was about a 2-hour drive south of Los Angeles. The temple, a house near the beach, was crowded with guests and visiting devotees. After Prabhupada had taken his seat upon the newly unfolded Vyasasan, some of the temple leaders came forward one at a time and bathed his feet. In the course of his lecture, Prabhupada spoke against taking intoxicating drugs. Is there anyone here who can say, I am the controller? Is there anyone who will answer this? You may think that you are the controller, but you are controlled by drugs. The city of Laguna Beach was notorious as an illicit drug center. Prabhupada had come not to flatter anyone with sentimental spirituality, but to cut through their illusion. Bathing the feet of the spiritual master was good, but to be a genuine devotee, one had to strictly follow the regulations. One had to choose whether to be controlled by drugs or by Krishna. Prabhupada stayed next door to the temple in a neighbor's house. His first visitor was Rishi Das, who had given up his initiation vows and fallen away from Krishna consciousness. Sporting long, curly hair and a beard, he had casually dropped by to pay a little visit to his former spiritual master. Prabhupada received Rishi warmly, and they both exchanged smiles and laughed. Rishi's demeanor, however, was brazen, almost defiant, and he showed no contrition. Prabhupada was not very happy to see the state of this boy to whom he had awarded the sannyasa order a few years before. In early years, Prabhupada had cried when a dear disciple had left him. In those days, the fall of a disciple had been rare, almost unheard of. But over the years, Prabhupada had seen more casualties, even among his GBC leaders and sannyasis. In 1967, when one of his first disciples, Krishna Devidasi, had left her husband Subala and gone off with a boyfriend, Prabhupada had consoled Subala by reminding him how rare it was that one could become a devotee of Krishna. The wonderful thing is not that Krishna Dasi has left, Srila Prabhupada has said, but that we can stay in Krishna consciousness. Although devotees left Krishna consciousness for various reasons, Srila Prabhupada saw them all as having been tricked by illusion. The result was almost always the same, whether the defector left on the plea of a new religion or new economic opportunities or whatever. Usually he or she would take up a life of sense gratification, abandoning the strict path of self-realization. This was certainly true for Rishi. When Prabhupada asked him what he was doing with his life, he laughed and said he was playing saxophone. There was no need to ask him whether he was chanting 16 rounds or following the 4 rules, but Rishi wanted to assure Srila Prabhupada that he was doing fine. I think I have more freedom now, said Rishi. Do you think you have more freedom? Prabhupada challenged. Some, Rishi replied, but by studying and working. What is your age? Prabhupada asked. 29. Are you free not to become older? Prabhupada persisted. Srila Prabhupada persisted. No. Then what is your freedom? Rishi gave a short laugh. I don't care. That's all right, Prabhupada replied. But I am researching. I am now 78. I don't wish to die, but I am forced. But, but you too are forced to become old. No one wants to be old. Recalling some of the Krishna conscious philosophy, Rishi tried to argue against Prabhupada, saying that although he was forced to grow old according to transmigration of the soul, he would be free after death. And anyway, there were other freedoms. Prabhupada stuck to his original point and said, death is inevitable. Old age, no one wants. Everyone wants youth. Even an old man goes to the beach for health. I want youth, but I cannot have it. So where is the freedom? Prabhupada then spoke at length for Rishi's benefit as well as for the benefit of the other devotees in the room. Persons under the influence of Maya, he said, declare that they are free. The drug addict or the drunkard thinks he's free to lie down on the street. Yet, his actions involve him in the strict laws of material nature. The outlaw declares himself free from the laws of the state, but he is put into jail. What is the use of his saying he's free? Therefore, Krishna says, Prabhupada explained, that whatever little freedom you've got, just surrender that freedom to me. Prabhupada's comments on false freedom were to the point. Within 2 hours of his arrival, he had already exposed the Laguna Beach mystique. Rishi continued to smile and argue, but before Prabhupada, he was just another youth with no real answers. Prabhupada was not interested in debating. He wanted to help his disciple. Rishi, however, was using whatever freedom he had to defy Krishna's representative, trusting instead in his youth, his intoxication, and his music. The door opened. These are some professors, Srila Prabhupada, announced the devotee, who form part of our congregation. Prabhupada greeted the new guests and asked that they sit up front on cushions. I was talking with this boy about freedom, said Prabhupada. So I say there is no freedom for us. We're always dependent. What is your opinion about it? One of the professors said he agreed, and Prabhupada continued speaking. He talked with the professors for more than 1 hour. Near the end, Upendra's 3-year-old son, Soumya, walked up to Prabhupada from the back of the room. Prabhupada gave him some money that was on the desk, and the boy ran back to his mother and gave her the money. Yes, when I was young, Prabhupada reminisced, if I got money, I would take it to my mother. But then when I would become angry at her, I would demand it back. Sometimes I would steal money from my mother's purse and go watch Charlie Chaplin movies. His favorite scene was in a film called Hard Times, he said, when Charlie Chaplin sat down at a table with a knife and fork to eat a boot. San Diego, July 27th, 1975. Srila Prabhupada rode down the San Diego freeway in the pre-dawn darkness. On his way to San Diego, he attend a festival in Balboa Park. On the way, he passed through San Clemente, where former President Richard Nixon was staying. Prabhupada had followed Nixon's exposure and resignation and had often mentioned it in his lectures, sometimes as an example of how even the most powerful men are subject to anxiety and loss, sometimes to illustrate the need for proper training in the 4 natural social orders. A devotee mentioned that Mr. Nixon lived here with no position, scorned by his countrymen. Then you should go and preach to him, Srila Prabhupada said. Since the man had lost everything and was lamenting, he said he might be receptive to hearing about the absolute truth. Prabhupada had attempted a similar approach to Mahatma Gandhi. At Balboa Park, Prabhupada was pleased with the devotees' boots and colorful tents and the stage they had erected in the meadow. He had just begun addressing the large crowd when a man in the audience began shouting. Prabhupada asked what he was saying. The devotee explained, and the devotee explained. Srila Prabhupada, the man says he wants to have sex more than once a month. He is creating disturbance, Srila Prabhupada said Prabhupada into the microphone. After a tense moment, Prabhupada continued his lecture. So, as this man is talking about sex, so this whole material world is enchanted by sex. Talking about shouting, taking the shouted protest as a new focus of his speech. For his speech, Srila Prabhupada quoted Prahlad Maharaj's statement that all material engagements begin from sexual enjoyment, which in comparison to transcendental pleasure in paltry and abominable. But real happiness, Prabhupada asserted, is above the senses. Whatever we enjoy with the gross senses is temporary, but permanent enjoyment is transcendental. So this man, he continued, was suggesting he wants sex at least once in a month. Yes, that is allowed. 5 days after the wife's menstrual period, the husband and wife can have sex for begetting rightful children. Prabhupada used the Vedic technical term Garbhadan Samskar to describe the process of purifying sex within marriage. The devotees were astonished that before a crowd of sexually liberated Southern Californians, Prabhupada was espousing responsible legitimate sex. Usually he discussed such matters, if at all, in letters to householders. But if the Americans were intent on sex, then Prabhupada would let them have it. But he stressed responsible, restricted sex. Otherwise, by irresponsible sex, one has to suffer. Sex life is not denied, Prabhupada said, but one must take responsibility for sex life. Otherwise, he becomes entangled in so many sinful activities. You can have sex life once in a month. That is prescribed because a woman has once in a month menstrual period. So sex life is meant for simply begetting nice children, not for sense gratification. If it is in regulated form, the world may not become hell. If it is in irregulated form, the world will be hell. Sex life is not denied. Sex life is not denied, but in a regulated form so that you can get nice population and live very happily. Especially at the present moment, if you can produce children to become Krishna conscious, that would be a great service to the Lord. Because we want a Krishna conscious population. Otherwise, this world is going to hell. There were great empires like the Roman, Greek, and later on the Mughal Empire, the British Empire, and then there was Napoleon, Hitler, Mussolini. So all these powerful empires and men have come and gone. Only a name is there now. Nothing is remaining. So I came to your country, America. I decided to come here because I heard your country is very nice. And when I came here, I saw actually that your country is very nice. Your cities, your buildings, your men also, because mostly my students are Americans and they help me very kindly to push on this movement. So I have studied the American life very nicely. They have a good heart. The only thing that is wanting is Krishna consciousness. For want of this Krishna consciousness, despite all your opulences, you are becoming confused and frustrated. I hear that out of there. I hear that out of 3, 1 man is a patient of a psychiatrist. Why? Why are you unhappy? Why should you be unhappy? You have got everything, enough food, land, money, intelligence. Why should you be unhappy? The cause of this you should try to find out. The cause is that without Krishna consciousness, without God consciousness, nobody can be happy. The outdoor audience was now quiet and attentive. Prabhupada spoke for about 40 minutes, ranging over different areas of Krishna conscious philosophy, and concluded with a request to the American men and women.
It's ranging, Rudadev, ranging.
ranging over different areas of Krishna conscious philosophy, and concluded with a request to the American men and women to seriously cooperate in Krishna consciousness and thereby find happiness. His talk was greeted with cheers, and the devotees continued to host the crowd throughout the afternoon, chanting and dancing and distributing prasadam. An Indian visitor was explaining to Prabhupada why India had to build up nuclear weapons and armed forces, but Prabhupada disagreed. The reason, he said, was the death of genuine Kshatriyas. There were no more men of courage. Therefore, a woman is now in charge. In the newspapers also had been much coverage of a U.S. merchant ship, the Marquise, which, when sailing within the 12-mile limit of Cambodia, had been seized without warning. President Ford had taken a strong stand, sending in the U.S. Marines. 15 Marines had been killed and 50 wounded in recovering the vessel. And the U.S. had bombed Cambodia. It was proper, Prabhupada said, for the U.S. to take a strong stand in defending the citizens abroad. Yes, America should be strong, he asserted. But first of all, they should become Krishna conscious. If they were actually a Krishna conscious nation, they should declare, if you touch the hair of one of our men, there will be a fight. Srila Prabhupada spoke strongly, giving the devotees a vision of a powerful America leading the world in Krishna consciousness. And this stirred within them hopes of a pure patriotism, such as in ancient Vedic culture, when the world had been ruled by God-conscious leaders. The next morning, before going to the airport, Srila Prabhupada took a walk in the Balboa Park. Hearing the sweet singing of birds, he said they were happy. They just take the fruits and they're singing in the morning, he said. Rameshwara. But when we tell people that they may take their next birth as an animal or bird, they say that's all right because these creatures are happier than the humans. Prabhupada, but because you are a rascal, you do not know that you have become more happy. Go back home, back to Godhead. That you do not know.
That you can become, not you have become. That you can become more happy.
You do not know that you can become more happy. Go back home, back to Godhead. That you do not know. Devotees liked to bring before Srila Prabhupada all kinds of topics for his comment. Conversations would jump from one thing to another as devotees sometimes brought up horrendous examples of contemporary degradation or sometimes tested their own doubts by posing as agnostics. Or sometimes they would simply bring to Prabhupada's attention ordinary sights and sounds. Whatever the topic, Prabhupada showed the devotees how to see things from the transcendental perspective. And thus, he also showed to them his own purity and humaneness. When a devotee told Prabhupada that Balboa was the first man to see the Pacific, Prabhupada at first seemed impressed. But a moment later, he scoffed. Everyone was already there. That they do not know. The Pacific, Atlantic, and Atlantic Oceans are mentioned in Kalidas Kavi's book Kumara Sambhava. They are all mentioned, Pacific, Atlantic Oceans. These fools do not know anything. They say, I'm the first man to come, as if before him there was no man. Just see. Prabhupada complimented the devotees on the previous day's festival in the park and advised them to hold such festivals every day. You're so rich, he said laughingly. You can do it. Continual festival. Tell them, come on, take prasadam, chant Hare Krishna. Just like, what is that? Who told me? Continual massage. Tama Krishna Goswami. Yes, they have 24-hour massage parlors. 24 hours, Prabhupada said, laughing. Similarly, 24 hours free prasadam. Come on. But they are not hungry, not for that. While walking to a meadow, they came upon a man standing on his head. Is this our man? Prabhupada asked. The devotees laughed and replied, No, yoga. He wants to be immortal, said Rameshwara. No, said Srila Prabhupada. This keeps them healthy, Tamal Krishna. It's good for the body? Yes. Shirshasana. Shirshasana it is called. Sitting on the head. Shirshasana, Padmasana, Yogasana. There are all so many asanas. There are so many asanas, Tamal Krishna. We don't practice those. Yes, we have no time for sleeping, said Prabhupada sarcastically. But the devotees
We
laughed
have
at his.
no time from sleeping, not for
Oh.
sleeping. We have no time from sleeping.
We have no. Okay. Okay. Yes, we have no time from sleeping, said Prabhupada sarcastically. The devotees laughed at his cutting remark. Otherwise, Prabhupada continued, this is not bad. This is not bad. It keeps good health, this yoga asana. Hearing Prabhupada's surprising praise at Hatha Yoga, a devotee asked the inevitable. So if we have time, can we do that? But now they had finished their walk and had arrived back at their cars. Srila Prabhupada chuckled as if aware that he was being baited with a controversial question. Hare Krishna, he said. On getting into the car, he added, not required. Dallas, July 28, 1975. Swami, why are you here? Asked the reporter at Dallas Fort Worth Airport. This is my home, said Srila Prabhupada. The reply delighted his disciples. I have got so many children, grandchildren, so I have to come to see them. Srila Prabhupada had written about Dallas Gurukul in his commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Krishna conscious movement he had written was training a new generation of Vaishnavas in its own school in Dallas, Texas. More than 100 boys and girls were now enrolled, and Srila Prabhupada liked to visit here whenever he toured the United States. Here, as in other ISKCON projects in the US, he involved himself little in the management, but he visited, making himself available to the teachers who were always ready with questions. Since there were no precedent, how is the pronunciation? Precedent?
Precedent. Yeah.
Since there was no precedent in the West for Krishna conscious education, and since the devotees wanted to develop the school just as Prabhupada desired, they felt they had to ask him about curriculum, teaching methods, hygiene, recreation, and so on. In the 100-degree weather, the schoolboys wore no shirts, and Srila Prabhupada ran the electric fan in his room. As soon as he arrived in his quarters, he asked all the children and adults to come into his room, and one by one they entered the room, held out a hand, and Prabhupada gave them a large rasagulla. That evening, he sat in a rocking chair in the lawn behind the temple, while devotees fanned him with a large peacock fan, and locusts droned loudly in the trees. He sat there with his disciples amid many thriving tulasi plants, listening to a reading from Krishna book. This was as much a lesson in how to conduct a Gurukul as were his answers to the teacher's intricate questions. At Gurukul, everything should be based on chanting and hearing about Krishna. Brahmananda Swami was reading about Krishna's rescuing his beloved Rukmini, while suddenly Srila Prabhupada interrupted and said that when they had been escaping on Krishna's chariot and the other princes had been attacking, Rukmini had taken the reins and had driven the chariot. Krishna had then taken his bow and arrows, and had defeated his opponents. The devotees were amazed. Many of them were keen students of Krishna book. Nowhere was that particular detail mentioned. Never before had they any of them heard of Rukmini's taking on the reins, nor had they ever thought of her in that way. But Prabhupada assured them that she had fearlessly driven Krishna's chariot during the fight. While Prabhupada was speaking, Dayananda, the Gurukul headmaster, stretched out his leg to find a more comfortable position, and Prabhupada turned to him and said sternly, "Do not put your feet near Tulasi. She is a pure devotee." When Brahmananda read a prayer from the Krishna book describing Krishna as the creator of the material elements, Prabhupada spoke up. "If we do not accept that Krishna made the sky," he challenged, "then who made it?" The blue of the Texas sky was now fading into twilight, and the guests and devotees alike looked up at the sky and then back to Prabhupada. According to Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada said, Krishna made the sky, Bhumi apo nalova yukam. So we should study like this, Aham sarvasya prabhava. The sky is the greatest material thing as he created it. In this way, study Krishna, not just studying Krishna with gopis. Then you will misunderstand. But the more you understand Krishna, the more you will become his staunch follower. Unauthorized persons never paint Krishna creating sky. They always want to see Krishna dancing with the gopis. And in this way, they try to support their own lusty activities. 2 Dallas newspapers had covered Prabhupada's arrival. The Dallas Times Herald printed a photo of Srila Prabhupada seated and garlanded with roses, his right hand raised, his index finger extended, instructing, "Barefoot Swami draws admiring Krishna crowd," the headline read. Aside from claiming that Srila Prabhupada was barefoot, actually he had worn shoes but had removed them when sitting cross-legged. The article pointed out a controversy around the Krishna devotees in Dallas. The article cited ISKCON's injunction with the officials of the Dallas Fort Worth airport, who had forbidden them to distribute literature and take donations. On hearing this article, Srila Prabhupada had commented, "This is good literature, it should be encouraged." But by reading it, people would become sane and they would understand their constitutional position. Otherwise, the people would go on being perturbed by crime and wondering what to do. Srila Prabhupada was particularly interested in the newspaper's version of his reply to the question about Indian politics. The Swami replied that Mrs. Gandhi is inclined to some spiritual understanding as if she fully develops into the situation. As if she fully develops it, the situation will improve. Democracy is not much beneficial if its leaders have no spiritual values. Mahatma Gandhi was practically a dictator, but he was a man of a high moral character, so people accepted him. Dictatorship can be good, provided the dictator is spiritually developed. Srila Prabhupada was repeatedly being asked about Indira Gandhi. The US government was critical of her newly instituted emergency rule, and particularly in Chicago, the reporters had tried to construe Prabhupada's comments about women as criticism of Prime Minister Gandhi. Both in Chicago and Dallas, Srila Prabhupada has stressed that he was not much concerned with politics, although he indicated that politics were useless without Krishna. Eager to keep good relations with the Indian government, Prabhupada did not like to speak publicly against India's leaders. He often expressed a desire to meet with the Prime Minister to assure her of her good work the Krishna conscious movement was doing, of the good work the Krishna conscious movement was doing for the benefit of India and the whole world, and to request her assistance. In India, visits had always been a problem for devotees. They had to continually leave the country and their service to renew their visas and then re-enter at great cost. Now some devotees, especially in Mayapur area, were being asked to leave the country because of America's stance against Indira Gandhi's political actions. Recently, Prabhupada had received word from the devotees in Delhi that they were trying to arrange such a meeting. So he liked the favorable statements on Indira Gandhi in the Dallas Times Herald and asked the article be saved. While walking near the White Rock Lake, the morning he was to leave for New Orleans, Srila Prabhupada dropped behind the main group of devotees and said to his servant, "I am not feeling well." The few sannyasis close by pressed in near him with concern. "Yesterday also," he added. "Is it due to the heat, Srila Prabhupada? I don't know why, but now I'm feeling headache and some spasm. Should we cancel the trip this morning?" Srila Prabhupada didn't answer. He admitted, however, the heat may have weakened his digestion. When asked if the food was to his liking, he replied, not very all right. Constantly change of hand is not good." Brahmananda Swami suggested another difficulty for health was the constant flying, but when he again suggested postponing the flight to New Orleans, Srila Prabhupada said no, and continued forward. July 31. The weather was stormy en route to New Orleans. Srila Prabhupada in the first class section with Upendra was looking out the window when the fasten your seatbelt announcement came, just 10 minutes before the scheduled landing. Suddenly, the plane dropped violently. Passengers screamed and clutched their armrests, bracing themselves. Upendra, frightened, speechless, thought, "If I have to die, it's all right, because Prabhupada is here." The downward plunge stopped abruptly, but then the plane began to lunge and roll, tossed by turbulent air currents. Overhead bins snapped open, and articles fell out, bouncing off passengers onto the floor. Srila Prabhupada turned to Upendra. "Why is it rocking?" he asked. "It's a storm," replied Upendra. He could see that Srila Prabhupada was calm. His expression was one of irritation, like over some minor incident, as when his lunch would be served late. In wind and downpour, the pilot finally touched the wheels onto the runway, landing without mishap. A sigh rose from the passengers, then cheering and applause. Srila Prabhupada seemed unaffected. He asked Upendra how long a drive it would be to the temple. Srila Prabhupada and his party arrived at the large mansion on Esplanade Boulevard in heavy rain. Nityananda and the New Orleans temple president.
Hare Krishna, Rudradeep Prabhu. Yeah. Kindly pause for a few minutes. Okay, so we see how Srila Prabhupada was driven by compassion. We see how much when Rishi was arguing with Srila Prabhupada, how Prabhupada tries to convince him. We can clearly see Srila Prabhupada's compassion in action, where he's trying to somehow or other make him see that you're foolish. What about the problem of old age and things like that? So Prabhupada's whole mission, the following of the order of a spiritual master, was driven by compassion. In fact, our whole parampara is the parampara of compassion. As Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, there has never been and there'll never be such followers as the followers of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is our distinctive trademark, or as they say, what is the distinctive characteristics of the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? This sense of compassion that the whole world is struggling. They're really suffering. So let's pull them out of that suffering. Of course, we could say, according to the Bhagavatam, suffering is superficial, right? Sufferings are superficial. The problem is the soul is steeped in that experience of superficial suffering. It's identifying with that suffering and therefore experiencing great inconvenience. So Prabhupada and all the previous acharyas in the parampara are determined, are really determined. You can see Prabhupada's determination in action. He's very determined to pull a Rishi out of compassion, out of his illusion. So not only compassion, but the determined compassion. That's very important. Sometimes we can be compassionate, okay, off and on some compassion. But Prabhupada is also determined in his compassion. Not only determined, uninterrupted compassion, constant compassion, 24 hours compassion. Like for example, Chaitanya Charitamrita, the marathon, he gave that order, the impossible order. Why? Because of that urgency, urgent compassion. You could add any what do you call it, adjective to that word compassion. You name it, and there it was. I mean, all the acharyas, especially Srila Prabhupada, who carried it out, displayed it. That urgent compassion, uninterrupted compassion, determined compassion. So all grades of compassion. Prabhupada was compassion, walking compassion, let's say. Prabhupada walked compassion. So here we see in this incident about Prabhupada in his pursuit of compassion was unaffected by material circumstances because of the fact that he was acting simply by the desire of Krishna. He was acting simply according to the plan of Krishna. Only when we have our plans, then we have anxiety. But when one is carrying out Krishna's plans, the sign is one has no anxiety. So Prabhupada is determined to carry out Krishna's plan. So you can see even when the plane is shaking or whatever, Prabhupada is going on with his work because he knows Krishna is in control of this aircraft. He doesn't bother about it. There is one story which I read where there is a girl who's sitting, a young girl actually, a minor. She's sitting in an aircraft and the aircraft is violently shaking. And she's not bothered. Whereas the man next door, the man in the next seat is in panic. What's happening? So then he sees this young girl and she's smiling and she's just carefree. So then he asks this young girl, how is it that you're so carefree amidst these circumstances? So she just replies that the pilot is my father and he's taking me home. This is the point, that Krishna is the pilot of our lives and he's taking us home. So in the process of taking us home, we may encounter some turbulence, but the plane is not going to crash. Plane is not going to crash. Krishna is going to take us home. That is the idea. Plane means, I'm not talking literally plane here. I'm talking about the ride of our lives. We are not going to collapse in that ride if we are Krishna conscious. Krishna will take us home. So that is how Srila Prabhupada was, as Mukunda Maharaj explains that once when Prabhupada in the room, Prabhupada is having some prasadam, and there's an earthquake. And the first impulse that Mukunda Maharaj says he had was to rush out. But Prabhupada just asked, what is that? And Mukunda Maharaj said, oh, it is an earthquake. So Mukunda Maharaj said, it's an earthquake. And Prabhupada said, oh, earthquake. And he just went on with life. So a pure devotee of the Lord is unaffected by anxiety while carrying out the mission of the Lord. Any thoughts, reflections, questions on what we've read so far? Okay, so Rudrati Prabhu, you could continue.
Was I here in the wind?
Yeah, you read that paragraph in the wind and downpour. You can read it again.
In wind and downpour, the pilot finally touched the wheels on the runway, landing without mishap. A sigh rose from the passengers, then cheering and applause. Srila Prabhupada seemed unaffected. He asked Upendra how long a drive it would be to the temple. Srila Prabhupada and his party arrived at a large mansion on the Esplanade Boulevard in heavy rain. Nityananda, the New Orleans temple president, having been given 2 weeks' notice for Prabhupada's visit, had hurriedly repainted the repainted and redyed all the buildings both here and at the Mississippi farm. Despite a thorough search of the city's markets, however, he had been unable to find a bitter melon, which he heard Srila Prabhupada took daily for digestion. Therefore, he had arranged for one of Prabhupada's secretaries to bring some from Dallas. Nityananda and the New Orleans devotees felt they were as ready for Prabhupada's visit as they would ever be. A wide marble staircase led up to the entrance, and Prabhupada, leaning on his cane, climbed it slowly as devotees threw flower petals down from the third floor. The entire distance from the car to the house, about 250 feet, was covered with a 3-foot wide white cloth leading up to the Vyasasana. Prabhupada bowed down before the deities of Gaurnitai, Radhakanta, and Lord Jagannath, sat down, but then decided it was too late in the morning to speak. Instead, he went at once to his quarters in the buildings next door. As soon as Srila Prabhupada reached his room, he was introduced to an official from the city hall who had come from the mayor's office to present him with an honorary welcome to New Orleans. Prabhupada graciously accepted a symbolic key to the city and a scroll welcoming and praising him as an honorable visitor. Seizing the opportunity, he began preaching to the man, treating his guest not as a city official, but just as any other conditioned soul. When the welcoming flurry had abated and Srila Prabhupada had bathed, taken prasadam, and rested, he called for Nityananda. When Nityananda entered, Prabhupada had sandalwood pulp on his forehead and wore a fresh garland. Nityananda offered obeisances. Alone in the room with his spiritual master, he felt embarrassed and fearful. Prabhupada picked up a photo album from his desk containing pictures of the farm of Mississippi. You know, he said, I have come especially to see your farm. Before sunrise, the next Srila Prabhupada left in the rain or on a as he was scheduled to fly to Detroit the next morning. The rain had stopped in Carrier, Mississippi, and Srila Prabhupada looked out across the gently rolling land. The ISKCON farm, cleared land, surrounded by a pine forest, was situated on a ridge. The previous owner had used the property as a horse ranch, and the modern 14-room brick house, a large barn, had several sheds were all in good condition. Prabhupada liked the land. He said it looked just like Bengal. Most of the devotees from New Orleans had raced to the farm to be with Prabhupada. They crowded into the temple room, waiting for him to give the morning Bhagavatam class. As soon as he began to speak, however, many flies came buzzing, landing on his head and body, and a devotee began fanning him with a chamara whisk, but to no avail. Come near, Prabhupada said. This chamara is especially meant for driving away flies. Even if it's touching the body, there is no harm. Toward the end of the lecture, Srila Prabhupada began speaking of the farm. Now, this place I see, although I have not seen all, it is a nice place. The grihastas may come here, have some small cottage, grow your own food grains and vegetables, and have your own cow's milk, get nice foodstuff, and save time. Why should you go into the city hundreds of miles in a car and again hundreds of miles back and take unnecessary trouble? Stick to this spot and grow your own food, make your own cloth, and live peacefully. Save time and chant Hare Krishna. This is actual life. What is this nonsense life? Big cities and all these people busy. To see a friend who has to go 30 miles, if he has to see a physician, he has to go 50 miles. If he has to go to work another 100 miles. So what is this life? This is not life. Be satisfied. A devotee's life should be prayojana. We require material necessities as much as is required. No artificial life. Srila Prabhupada went on to depreciate the life of simply machine, 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 machine. He asked the devotees to show by practical example how to live simply and advance in Krishna consciousness. If they could show the example, people would try to follow. Although Nityananda and the others had been living on the land for many months, Prabhupada's words gave them the real direction and purpose for the project. If it was as if he were now breathing life into his project. So the Prabhupada went to his room and sat with Brahmananda Swami, Swatsvarupa Das Goswami, Rishikesh, Harikesh, Jagadish, and Upendra, where he began speaking about Varnashram. He called for Nityananda. They should try not to use machines, he said. The men and animals should do the work. Nityananda asked whether the householders should produce food cooperatively as an individual families. They should work together, said Prabhupada. Or what's the use of living in a community center? When Upendra asked how the milk wood should be used, Srila Prabhupada explained what he called the Indian village system. As Nanda Maharaj was keeping cows, he said similarly there were many villages that they have a big plan, and whatever milk is collected, they put into the pan. Oh, they have a big pan, and whatever milk is collected, they put into that pan. It is kept on fire and is warm, so the whole family can drink milk whenever they like. Then, whatever milk remains at night, they have to convert it into yogurt. The next day, they use milk and yogurt also as they like. Then, after converting the milk into yogurt, whatever remains is sorted. If there is sufficient old yogurt, they churn and the butter comes out. They take that butter and the water separated from the butter is called whey.
Rudradi Prabhu, why is your screen like this? I mean, can you do like how your screen is sharing before?
Screen?
You're able to, yeah, you're able to see, I don't know, we are able to see the full computer with the icons and all that. It's not just the page alone.
Oh. So just give me one moment. I'll just stop share then. I'll show the screen.
It's still the same though.
I don't know how to.
Okay, all right.
This one I can.
Okay, it's okay. It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Good.
Where was I? If there is sufficient yogurt, they churn and then butter comes out. They take that butter and the water separated from the butter is called whey. So instead of dal, they use this whey for eating with chapatis. It will be very healthy and tasty. Meanwhile, the butter they turn into ghee. There is not a single drop of waste. So Prabhupada said that everyone should take as much milk as necessary and that the ghee could be used in ISKCON restaurants in the cities. Curd could also be used in the restaurants for making sandesh, rasagulla, and other dishes. Srila Prabhupada stressed that the farm be well organized, engaging all classes of men, brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and shudras, no laziness or unemployment. Otherwise, he said, people will criticize that we are all simply eating and sleeping and escaping. Nityananda asked whether they should immediately stop using farm machinery. We're not against the machine, Prabhupada explained. You can utilize machine, but we should not allow the others to be unemployed while we use the machine. This is the point. You can use the machine, but the first thing is that everyone should be employed. If you have got many men, then why should you engage the machine? Srila Prabhupada also explained that in Vedic culture, the Kshatriyas collected tax and protected the citizens while the Shudras worked in the fields or at trade. The women would cook, spin, weave, and take care of the milk products. The low-class men, such as cobblers, who used the skin of dead cows, were allowed to eat meat. But not that one is Professor such and yet he's eating meat, Prabhupada said. This is the way of degraded modern society. Teacher means Brahmana, yet he is eating meat. How horrible. So do these things, so do these things and organize. I can give you the idea, but I will not live very long. If you can carry it out, you can change the whole world, especially if you can change America, and the whole world will change. Srila Prabhupada became emotional and tears came into his eyes. It is the duty, he said. Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has explained para upakar, save them. If it is not possible to save everyone, as many as possible, that is human life. This is Krishna consciousness, to save who are there in the darkness. Don't think, he said, Krishna consciousness is my profession. I'm getting a living, food, and shelter. This is just what the Indians are doing. Not like that. It is Paraupakar. This is Krishna consciousness. Then Krishna will be very much pleased. Krishna personally comes for giving the benefit to the people. And if you do, then how much Krishna will be pleased? Just like I'm traveling to my centers, and if I see that my students, my men are doing very nice, everything is going nice, how pleased I will be. Then I can save my labors and now write books for the rest of my life. Similarly, if Krishna sees that you are on behalf of Krishna trying to save these rascals, then you will very much please Krishna. The Vaishnav's qualification is paradukha dukhi. He is unhappy seeing others' distress. This is a Vaishnava. Srila Prabhupada ended the intimate meeting by rising and leaving the room. When Rishikesh mentioned that he was spending 2.5 hours to cook Srila Prabhupada's lunch, Prabhupada said, you don't know how to cook. I will show you and do it in 1 hour. 1 hour, said Rishikesh, almost in disbelief. This is amazing. Prabhupada then took off his shirt and entered the little kitchen of Mississippi Farm. While a crowd of devotees peered in through the open door, Prabhupada looked at his wristwatch and announced, it is now 12 o'clock. He used the same three-tiered brass cooker he had brought in America in 1965. In the bottom section, he put mung beans and water. In the middle section, he put rice. And in the top, he arranged various cut vegetables, squash, peas, potatoes, and cauliflower. Putting the cooker over in a low flame, he then poured an inch of ghee into the frying pan and placed it over a flame. He then cut up an eggplant, dipped the pieces into turmeric and salt, and began frying them in hot ghee. He mixed and kneaded dough and began rolling out chapatis. Periodically, he checked his wristwatch, and when 45 minutes had passed, he took the cooker's top off and turned it upside down to use it as a small frying pan. He put in ghee and cooked some bitter melon, then deftly added cumin, anise, chili, and asafoetida. He squeezed lemon on the steamed vegetables, and within a few minutes he had finished. Srila Prabhupada looked at the watch. 1 hour, he said. We have cooked 9 preparations. He then left the kitchen with his servant prepared his plate. Prabhupada said that everyone who had watched him cook should be given some of the prasadam. And about 5 in the afternoon, Prabhupada toured the farm. In the barn, he saw the calves taking milk. How are you using the bulls? He asked. Like a hesitant student, Nityananda replied, to plow? Yes, said Prabhupada, to plow and transport. You have to engage more men for plowing. 2 bulls may be used for each plow. Passing by a hayfield, Prabhupada asked why the cut hay still lay on the field. Nityananda explained that he had to wait for it to dry after the rain. Prabhupada warned that the rain could spoil the hay. It should be harvested soon. Coming upon a 3-acre plot of sugarcane, he walked up one row and entered deep into the cane patch, which stood several feet above their heads. Emerging on the other side, they came onto the edge of a forest of pine. These jungles are natural arrangement, said Prabhupada. You cut the trees, make your home, and balance of it you can make for fuel. Then the ground you can plow and grow your own food. That's all. It's natural. Prabhupada lamented modern society's waste of trees by printing heaps of useless newspapers. He saw that the 2 acres of fruit trees the devotees had planted, satsumas, peaches, pears, and figs, as well as the 25 large pecan trees. But he discovered discrepancies. Nityananda had lined up for Prabhupada's inspection two tractors, a large forage harvester, a hay conditioner, a hay mower, rakes, a bowler, and a wagon. But when Prabhupada saw the machines standing in the open, he asked why they were not being kept under cover. Nityananda replied, they were still building a shed. In the meantime, it will be finished. Srila Prabhupada said Prabhupada. By the time you finish your shed, they will be rusty and gradually become useless. He quoted a Hindi proverb and translated. A woman was dressing to go to a fair, but when she was finally dressed, the fair was already finished. The devotees laughed, but Nityananda was grave. Prabhupada continued. Utilize these machines, otherwise, while they are in working order, sell them. But don't keep idle in this neglected way. Nityananda showed Prabhupada where 25 acres of sorghum was growing. This grain was for the animals and when harvested would go into the silos. So everything is for the animals? Asked Prabhupada. Nothing for man? The cow gives us milk, explained Nityananda. That's all? Asked Prabhupada. Are you not growing any food grains? Why? Prabhupada asked instruction. Prabhupada's instruction was clear. Just before the walk was over, he asked Nityananda, what will the oxen do? Plow the fields, Nityananda replied, like a student having learned his lesson. Yes, said Prabhupada, that is wanted. Transport and plowing the fields. And unless our men are trained up in Krishna consciousness, they will think, what is the use of taking care of the cow? Better go into the city, earn money, and eat them. This statement was similar to an instruction Prabhupada had given in various temples after installing the deity of Radha and Krishna. If the devotees were not enthusiastic, he had warned, the deity worship will deteriorate into mere ritual, until finally the devotees would resent their spiritual masters, giving them such a burden. Likewise, on the farms, if the devotees do not utilize the bulls in a natural way, and if they do not use the milk properly, then eventually they would want to get rid of the animals by conducting things by conducting things as Prabhupada had taught. However, the devotees, the cows, and the bulls would live cooperatively and happily, and Krishna would be pleased. Although for years, Srila Prabhupada had given many practical instructions on other areas in the Krishna conscious movement, this was one of the first times he had given so many practical directions on conducting Varnashram society. He felt satisfied and pleased to have seen such a promising Krishna conscious farm community, and re-entering the house, said he was ready to return to New Orleans. It had been a busy, productive day in the service of Krishna, and tomorrow would be another.
Again, we see here Prabhupada stressing the understanding of Paradukha Dukhi, that Krishna conscious devotees are very compassionate towards other living entities, especially by giving them Krishna consciousness. So again and again, Prabhupada lived and breathed compassion. He was driven by the spirit of para dukkha dukhi. That is the nature of a pure devotee of the Lord. And here in this section, we see how he gave such very simple, very simple ideas of how to lead a life which is simple and which is based on uh, Krishna consciousness. You know, I mean, after having lived in Mayapur for so many years, uh, I'm now in a city, of course, for Krishna conscious reasons. But when I go out into the city, I just see Prabhupada's words everywhere. What are these people doing in life? Just moving around, rushing about in cars. Where? Where are they going? What are they doing? What are they doing in life? So this is the advantage of Prabhupada's teachings, that you see the actual reality of this world. People are in a meaningless pursuit of nothing actually. But finally, everything is going to be smashed by death. Nothing, not even 1% accomplishment they can achieve. Nothing. It's all zero. Becomes zero. They're working so hard for zero. That kind of sense you get when we read Prabhupada's books and then we look into the world, especially when those of you who are in cities may be able to see it more obviously. But those of us who don't live in cities, when we come to a city, it becomes very obvious what Prabhupada is teaching and really hits us in the face, as they say. Um, so this compassion is an urgent thing, and the whole Krishna consciousness movement is all about urgency. We may think that how urgency and normalcy are not compatible. Yes, in material life, urgency and normalcy are not compatible. But in Krishna consciousness, urgency is normalcy, in the sense that Krishna is saying it is urgent, right? So therefore, we are executing his plan. And when we execute his plan of urgency, we become normal. We are not normal because we don't feel the urgency of Krishna consciousness. So this is the point, that uh, we cannot uh, we cannot mix our understanding of material life and spiritual life. In spiritual life, the more we uh, uh, more we develop that sense of urgency, the more peacefully situated we are. The more complacent we are, the more restless we become. The more we develop that sense of mission, this is the Krishna conscious movement. It's a missionary movement. It's a mission. So the more we take up the sense of a mission, the more we feel contented, more we feel happy. So the more we feel, more we get into a mode of complacency. Let me just lead a very refined Krishna conscious version of mundane life. Like how Prabhupada is saying that in the bulls are there, the cows are there. Unless one has a Krishna conscious vision, one will think it's a burden. Simply go to the city and try to enjoy life, and in fact, even says about eating the cow. People end up doing it. So we have to. Prabhupada explained that thinking, feeling, willing. The thinking leads to feeling, feeling leads to willing. So if we need to think properly, we need to read the Bhagavatam, and we need to study Prabhupada's life, because he's the living Bhagavata. So we need both book Bhagavata and the living Bhagavata, because they're always uh, fully synchronized. And seeing that, we should lead our life. Our Prabhupada said, do as I am doing. So we can't change that. We have to have the same missionary spirit that Prabhupada had. And Prabhupada had that missionary spirit even as a Grihastha, not at a later point in his life. So he was consistent in his spirit, missionary spirit, para dukkha dukhi. So that is an important thing that we have to understand, that sense of enthusiasm. Do whatever it takes to keep life simple, to spare time to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Of course, one could say that if we just think about spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, what about our own lives? So our movement has made that mistake in the past, where due to an improper understanding of what it meant to spread the Krishna conscious movement, they went to an extent of neglecting an exemplary life. If we do not lead exemplary lives, we cannot spread the Krishna consciousness movement effectively. So we should live the Bhagavatam, which means that we should perform our responsibilities very nicely, whether as a grahastha or a sannyasi or whatever. We should be very effective grahasthas, effective sannyasis, whatever, brahmacharis. And that needs to be transmitted into the larger world. So it is not possible to preach effectively, para dukkha dukhi, if our lives are not effective models of Krishna consciousness. Okay, I think I would like to stop my comments on that here. If there are any reflections, questions, other comments. Okay, Rudradi Prabhu, you could read for another 10 minutes and then we'll wind up. I mean, the class is supposed to be till 5 and then question answers. So sometimes I open up in between. So since there are no reflections or questions or comments, so then we'll read for another 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay, bro. Detroit, August 2, 1975. Alfred Ford, the great-grandson of Henry Ford, had become attracted to Krishna consciousness. Though meeting some of Srila Prabhupada's disciples in Detroit and through reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, he had adopted the principles of Krishna consciousness, begun regularly chanting 16 rounds, and was now Srila Prabhupada's initiated disciple. Ambrish. Today, Ambrish was at the airport behind the wheels of a white Lincoln Continental limousine waiting to meet Srila Prabhupada. On seeing Srila Prabhupada approach, Ambrish got out of the driver's seat and offered obeisances. He opened the back door of the limousine for Srila Prabhupada, shut it, and returned to his seat, just like a menial chauffeur. We devotees also have a car, said Prabhupada as they drove away, but we are going to the temple and distributing books with it. Anything can be used for Krishna. He is a rich man's son, Alfred Ford. We're giving him a little spiritual teaching and he is happy. Another of Srila Prabhupada's Detroit disciples was Elizabeth Ruther, now Lekashravanti Devidasi, the daughter of labor reader Walter Reuther. Ambrish told Prabhupada that the Fords and the Ruthers had been enemies, but now two of their descendants were peacefully working together in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada was pleased with the humility of these two disciples. While he gave them some special status, he did not dote on the fact that they were from such famous families. Ambrish and Lekashravanti saw themselves as humble servants of the Vaishnavas. On the way to the temple, Prabhupada's car passed a large modern building displaying flags of many nations and a large sign, World Headquarters Ford. One of the devotees turned to Ambrish and asked, "Is this where you work?" From the back seat, Prabhupada spoke up, "No, he's the proprietor." As they passed by a big urban redevelopment project, Prabhupada asked, "What is this?" "This is known as Detroit's Renaissance Center," said Ambrish. They will never have a renaissance," Prabhupada replied. The Detroit temple was located in an old brick house. With the temple room in the third floor attic, the lease was soon due to run out, and Govardhan, the temple president, was looking for a new place. He showed Prabhupada photos of likely buildings, one of them a mansion of the late auto industry millionaire Lawrence Fisher. The place was probably too expensive, Govardhan said, and was located in a bad neighborhood. But Prabhupada was interested. In fact, whatever the devotees cited as bad about the mansion, Prabhupada would say was actually good, or at least could be easily rectified. As for the high crime rate in the area, he said, you will have nothing to fear. Just chant Hare Krishna and distribute prasadam. Invite all the neighborhood people, thieves and rascals, to take prasadam and chant, and you won't have any thefts. Devotees emphasized that Detroit was the crime capital of the US and that the poor slum area where the mansion was located was known for drug trafficking, robberies, and murders. But Srila Prabhupada repeated that they should not be afraid. I lived in the Bowery, he said, and he described how the bums used to urinate in the front door and lie across the doorway. But when he would come in to enter the building, they would get up and say, yes, sir, come on, sir. Get the place, Prabhupada said, and chant Hare Krishna there 24 hours a day. If thief comes, we will say, yes, first take prasadam and then take whatever you want. What do we have? Srila Prabhupada went to see the mansion with Govardhan, Amrish, and several GBC men. They were met by the owner and a lady who introduced herself as a real estate agent. As the owner guided them on a tour, Prabhupada came to like the estate even more. The palatial building was situated on 4 acres, surrounded by high stone wall. There were gardens and walkways now in disrepair, as well as fountains and a swimming pool. Some of the devotees thought the place gaudy, with its extravagant 1920s decor, but Srila Prabhupada saw the great potential. As soon as he entered the vestibule and saw the ornate Italian tiles and marble archways, he began to smile. The group entered the lobby, its high ceilings covered with classically sculptured leaves, rosettes, and hand-painted plaster flowers. Next, they entered the ballroom with its marble floor and high vaulted ceiling painted to resemble an early evening blue sky with clouds and stars. Special lighting gave the effect of a natural starlight. At one end of the hall, 3 marble arches exactly resembled the design Prabhupada had given for the deity altars in his temples. 3 altars could be installed here, and the ballroom made into a temple with a very little renovation. Prabhupada did not comment to the owner on the ballroom situability, but to the devotees it was obvious. The tour then proceeded to the boat well, an indoor water carriage capable of holding several yachts. The boat well opened into a channel, which opened into the nearby Detroit River. Prabhupada mentioned that devotees could get a boat for their preaching. As Prabhupada and his entourage entered one gorgeous room and after another, they saw many carved stone columns, hand-painted floor and wall tiles from Italy and Greece, and ceilings ornamented with gold-leafed figures. Rare antique crystal chandeliers adorned many of the rooms. There were living rooms, library rooms, a dining room, a billiard room, a music room, 2 master bedrooms, other bedrooms, all extravagances. Each room is worth the entire price, said Prabhupada privately to the devotees. The owner spoke of Mayan, Moorish, Spanish, Greek, and Italian influences and pointed out that the 2 hand-carved spiral columns in the dining room were salvaged from an ancient European palace. Wherever Srila Prabhupada looked, he saw opulence, an indoor marble fountain, a wall of iridescent tiles, hand-painted cornices. Even the large bathrooms were extraordinary, with glamorous imported tiles and gold-plated accents. The introductory tour completed, Prabhupada, his followers, the owner, and the real estate agent sat together at an umbrella-covered patio table by the swimming pool. Already Srila Prabhupada had mentioned to his disciples that the owner should donate the building for ISKCON's missionary purposes. And he had told Brahmananda Swami to make the request. Since the owner had not mentioned the price, Prabhupada spoke up. So we are beggars, he began. He was serious, and yet he spoke with an air of humor. Amrisha and Upendra hid their faces in embarrassment. We have no money, Prabhupada continued boldly. Therefore, we're asking you, please give us this building. The owner glanced incredulously at the real estate agent and then laughed nervously. It is out of question, he said. I can't do that. The agent was also taken back and upset. He can't do that, she whispered. I can't give it to you, explained the owner, because I have taken a loss in maintaining this property, so I have to make my money back. The property represents a major part of my income. Then said Srila Prabhupada, how much do you want? Well, the man replied, I have to get at least $350,000. None of the devotees dared to say anything. Prabhupada thought for a moment and then said, we will give you 300,000 cash dollars. I'll have to think about it, the man replied. The real estate agent got to her feet, saying that a transaction like this usually not done straight to the owner, but Prabhupada ignored her and spoke with the owner about how lovely the mansion was. Prabhupada then got up, took a short walk in the garden with his men. Govardhan asked Prabhupada if he'd liked it, and Prabhupada said yes. Who would not like such a building? Amrish doesn't like it, said Govardhan. Oh, Amrish said he thought the mansion was Maya. Yes, said Srila Prabhupada, but Maya is also Krishna. We can use anything in Krishna's service. Leaving the garden path and returning to their cars, Prabhupada asked Amrish, so is this possible? Yes, Prabhupada, this is possible. As soon as they returned to the temple, Amrish and Lekha Shravanti conferred. Her inheritance was limited, but she was able to give 125,000. Amrish had to come up with the balance. The next day, the owner came to see Srila Prabhupada. The man was accompanied by two women, and they all appeared a little intoxicated. He had come to say that he accepted the offer. Prabhupada smiled and reaffirmed his intention to buy. Afterwards, Srila Prabhupada openly showed his blissfulness about the purchase. Just see, he said, I didn't have one penny, and yet I offered him 300,000 cash, and now Krishna has provided the money. As Prabhupada had told the estate owner, I am a sannyasi, I have no money, and after collecting $300,000 from his disciples, he still had no money. Within a few days, he left for Toronto, taking nothing for himself, as everything was Krishna's, to be used in Krishna's service.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
What a transaction. Any thoughts, questions, reflections? This is the Devasadan Mandir, Detroit.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, Hare Krishna Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Wonderful having a class back again after a 3 or 4 week hiatus.
2 weeks.
What is the situation?
2 weeks.
2 weeks? It feels like 3 or 4, Prabhu. In separation, it feels twice as long. What is the situation with Detroit? I heard that it was in disrepair and stuff like that. Is that correct?
I have friends living in Detroit. I didn't hear that, but I can find out. By next class, I'll definitely.
It'll be interesting to find out what happened to because I know it had some management issues. the likes, but I wasn't sure what the situation is of the temple.
Yeah, we have the mansion still. I don't think it's anyway. I don't want to comment. I don't think it's in disrepair. Let's check. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, bro. Yeah, it was a lot of nectarian things today, wasn't it? With the understanding how Srila Prabhupada, sort of thinking is progressing in terms of the development. There was quite a lot of emphasis in farm communities and self-sufficiency today as well, which is interesting for us city folk who are, as you say, living in the middle of the Maya-ridden society. It is an eye-opener as to how we should perhaps be conducting our lives. What is your take, Prabhu, on? I know there's growing disparity and different camps in terms of preaching styles, and Prabhupada's intentions here seem that we should perhaps not unruffle the political elite and bring them on board, whilst we are also equally trying to preach to the political elite today in making a lot of groundwork, or making a lot of movement towards. There's a lot of preachers who are doing just mode of goodness preaching, sort of online, etc., which is fantastic in that we're at least elevating people to mode of goodness, but we're not actually giving them Krishna. So what are your thoughts on that sort of form of preaching in ISKCON today?
I did a little bit of work on that to find out how Prabhupada did things, and we see that consistently. If Prabhupada is not allowed to speak straight Krishna consciousness, then he prefers to do chanting. That's it. Either he speaks the whole truth, or he doesn't speak at all. He just says, let them chant. So Prabhupada, there is no precedent where Prabhupada actually did anything other than direct Krishna conscious preaching. Now, there is one place in Vrindavan, one instance where he speaks about having yoga classes in Vrindavan. So there he says, let these people who are interested in yoga, let them come to Vrindavan. We'll make them sit on probably a deer skin or whatever. I mean, I think deer skins are banned these days, but in any case, whatever is closest to the Hatha Yoga system, make them focus on the tip of their nose. Then he says, read the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Make them read somebody reads and they hear, something like that. So Prabhupada was very flexible in changing the externals as long as the message was direct. So you can't change both the externals and the message. You can change the externals, but the message has to be direct. This is what at least in Prabhupada's life, this is the only thing that he demonstrated. So personally, I think that we should stick with that. Although the externals can be modified in various ways, but we should stick with direct Krishna consciousness. Because Vyasadeva, he wrote Vedic literatures. He's not even writing mundane literatures or whatever. I mean, he wrote the Vedic literatures. And even after writing everything without giving the Bhagavatam, he was restless. So no matter what we try with this mode of goodness also creates restlessness. The restlessness it creates could be lesser than the restlessness created by the modes of passion and ignorance. Fine. But mode of goodness also creates restlessness. Vyasadeva was definitely in the mode of goodness there could be nobody better than Vyasadeva in the mode of goodness, you could say. Still, he was restless, dissatisfied. So, what to speak of those human beings in this Kali Yuga? So, there is only Krishna consciousness which can solve the problem of dissatisfaction or restlessness. So, without giving the direct message, the danger is that people could just become restless, give up whatever. they could. I mean, normally what I've heard is it's a bridge, so the bridge to take them somewhere. But people get stuck on the bridge, right? So I mean, it is not a method which Srila Prabhupada ever adopted. So I'm not in favor of it. I don't oppose it, but I'm not in favor of it. Because Prabhupada, sometimes he did say, judge by the results, right? If the results make people take up to Krishna consciousness and understand the value of presenting Krishna consciousness directly, but they're not able to present due to some reason, that's a different thing. So the products of the approach is very important. Products, I mean, I don't mean the material product. Here, I'm just talking in terms of just language. So what is the result? The result should produce beings who are convinced, just like Vyasadeva, that the longer it takes to present Krishna consciousness, the longer is people going to be restless. So let Krishna consciousness be presented, if not immediately, at least as early as possible in their methods, whatever they are trying. If that urgency is not there to present Krishna consciousness as it is, as soon as possible, then the effort can be itself very distracting. It itself can become a trap of Maya.
Thank you, Prabhu. And what similar thoughts on projects where we are, the kind of empowerment projects and women's empowerment projects, etc., many projects, which again is providing upskilling sort of poverty-stricken communities so that they have a livelihood. But if the nub of the issue is, if we're not giving them Krishna consciousness, what benefit have we actually given them?
I think if we differentiate between who can do what, so should ISKCON start a hospital? No. Can devotees start a hospital? Yes. Why not? Like a group of devotee doctors who are practicing can come together and open a hospital, because that is their means of livelihood. Whereas ISKCON is not meant to create livelihoods and things. ISKCON is meant to give spiritual teachings. So opening a hospital is definitely not part of ISKCON's bona fide activities. It's not one of ISKCON's bona fide activities. But devotees can do it. There are congregation members anyway who are doctors and who would like to be together and do things together. So we have the wonderful example of the Bhakti and the hospital. So congregational member, anybody can do something if it is meant for their livelihood. And ISKCON is not meant for earning livelihood. So when we say ISKCON is a missionary. I mean, it is a movement. It's a missionary movement. So which means that whatever is direct Krishna consciousness should be taken up by ISKCON, and whatever is prescribed by Srila Prabhupada should be taken up by ISKCON. Prabhupada very clearly says, our men shall not tie bandages. For example, I mean, he says many things about hospitals. He really criticizes the concept of members of a mata engaging in activities of the hospital. Whereas congregational members, they can do anything. I mean, anything means, of course, as long as within the codes of Dharma. That's fair enough. So whatever upskilling or whatever, let the grihasthas do that. Let them do whatever for their livelihood or whatever. In the process of earning their livelihood, they will also be uplifting other people. That's fine. But not ISKCON. ISKCON devotees, yes, but not ISKCON as an institution. Institutional funds cannot be used for these purposes. That's my take on it.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so if there are no further thoughts, reflections, comments, or questions, then we can end for today and we'll resume again coming Sunday. Thank you all very much for joining. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripas